So hi everyone, welcome to When the Job Search Feels Hard. My name is Roxanne Fenton. I am the Associate Director in Career and Professional Development. And my co-presenter, I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Eilish Russell. I'm one of the two career advisors in the Office of Career and Professional Development, and so excited to be chatting about this topic today.
So I think with that, we'll go ahead and bring up our slides. Eilish, I assume you're gonna run those
Absolutely.
because you've got the Slidos.
I do. Okay.
All right. So we wanted to tackle this topic because this is something that we see graduating students and alumni struggling with, people being worried about. It's also very timely given the way the job market is in a number of fields right now, we'll say. So we're going to go ahead and talk about our goals for this workshop. First, we want to enable you to feel like you can take an intentionally curious approach to your job search. And we're going to talk about why curiosity in a little more detail. But one reason for curiosity is really that it lets us apply design thinking and design practices to the job search. So things that many of you are learning or have learned at Art Center. It also keeps us looking at new possibilities and allows us to pivot when something isn't working. And so that's really our second goal, is to allow you to feel like you are able to pivot and weather changes in a job search or an internship search rather than focus on a single plan. So we're going to talk about building curiosity and how that relates specific to the job search. We'll identify roadblocks and how to kind of handle those. We're going to talk about developing plans with an emphasis on multiple plans and how you can prototype a plan in a very design search kind of way. Resilience is a really important psychological ability to have when anything is challenging. So we're going to talk a little bit about resilience and how we build that. And then we'll talk briefly about leaning on our community. We do have another workshop all about community coming up next week. We have some tips for international students. I didn't ask if any of you are international, but if you are, we have some specified tips for you all. And then we'll do a little bit of reflection at the end. So that's where we're going. We have some activities and some breaks planned to really kind of help you take in this whole topic. And with that, we'll get started. So we are using a polling software called Slido, and you can either use the QR code if you want to do this on your phone, or if you are on a computer and you want to do this on the browser, you can go to slido.com and enter that 7-digit code that will let you add into our poll. And we want you to share a small win you've had either in your direct job search or that you could imagine having in a job search. So this could be as small as, you reached out to someone and they replied, you found a job listing that had just been posted and you were able to apply right away, or you had a great talk about your job search with a trusted friend. So anything that you can think of that would be a small win that you might have during your job search. And feel free to borrow one of the ones that I just gave you. Our focus here is to remind ourselves of what those small wins feel like and what those small wins can look like. I see we've got two of you typing. Is anybody having technical troubles getting into Slido?
You're also welcome to share in the chat if you are having technical troubles getting into Slido, and we
Yeah,
can read those out loud.
apologies. Is it Slido.com and then the hashtag and that number, or is it how do we get into I guess that web portal?
If you go to slido.com, you should see a box where it asks you for a code. And you just put in the code in that box.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Shay Seymour has added a link to the code itself in the chat for anybody who is interested.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm on mobile.
No worries.
And these are anonymous. They're going to show up, but they're not going to be tied to you. So don't worry about, we have no idea who puts what in or who is even connected to Slido. So just feel free to share a small win that you've had or that you can imagine having. Something you might want to celebrate. Well, oh, we've got 6 people in Slido now. Fantastic. So we'll give you another minute or two to type in your small wins.
I will say I'm typing and I don't see mine popping up.
Oh, that's interesting.
But I was just hypothetically saying somebody who got an interview.
Yeah, that would absolutely be a win that would absolutely be a win to share and to celebrate. Is anybody else having trouble with their typing not showing up?
It's a little bit difficult for it to show up. We can kind of troubleshoot what that looks like. But maybe if anybody wants to share out loud what they added in to the poll or again in the chat.
Yeah, I actually, so I was not having a lot of luck with my search, and I did an ATS optimized resume, and that really changed a lot of my outcomes. And I've had several interviews, and it's been using that, and that has been really successful and efficacious in my job search for my next role.
Fantastic. And we have resources on our website about resumes that are optimized for applicant tracking systems, those ATS. Yeah, that's a fairly small change that sounds like it is yielding good things. So fantastic. All right. Well, I think well, hopefully our other polls will work better, but you're still in Slido, so hopefully that will continue to work. But let's go on and talk about the importance of curiosity in your job search.
Yes. So we are going to talk a little bit about, as Roxanne mentioned, kind of curiosity and how it is really involved in the kind of design and prototyping process that we can apply to our job search. And a lot of the concepts that we have pulled from for this particular workshop are from these 2 books that you're seeing on screen. That's Designing Your Life by Bill Burnett and Dave Evans, and The Squiggly Career by Helen Tupper and Sarah Ellis. I really recommend, whether you're a current student looking towards your post-graduation future job search, or you are an alum who is, 1, 10, 15 years post-graduation into their job search. If you're able to find either of these books and read them in full, I really recommend doing so. They're both really, really wonderful, kind of much larger umbrella thinking processes as it relates to kind of your job search and defining what processes and pathways are going to be the most helpful for you. The Art Center Library does have copies of them, so you may be able to get them completely for free there if you're interested. But I wanted to highlight that we're pulling a lot of concepts directly from these books, and so they are really a great read. So I really want to start our chat today with kind of an understanding of curiosity, right? So curiosity is a motivation. It's something that might be innate in us, or we might have kind of let our curiosity muscle weaken a little bit for any number of reasons. But curiosity is motivation to learn. And that could be learn new skills, learn new knowledge, acquire a new umbrella of information that can be applicable in a lot of different ways. It's motivation to be open to new ideas. So considering other strategies or techniques or directions that we hadn't thought of before, maybe because they're going to be equally as beneficial, or maybe just because that's the phase of life that we're in now. And finally, it's motivation to explore new environments. Maybe do something that we normally wouldn't feel maybe the most excited about, or push ourselves into doing something that we have always wanted to do, but have never taken the jump for. So I want us to think about curiosity as kind of these three main areas that we can pull into our job search and specifically reflect on when we're feeling maybe a sense of stagnation or frustration in where our job search is at in the moment. Let's talk about why curiosity is important, right? So in general, curiosity supports your ability to keep learning and developing. We always want to continue to be learning and developing. It's a way that we develop new skills. It's a way that we learn new information. And it can also be a really personally fulfilling experience to explore our curiosity. But specifically as it relates to the job search, curiosity really impacts our motivation and our ability to upskill or reskill or reinvest a certain direction to weather a changing job market, to weather a job market that isn't the most optimal, which is where a lot of us are seeing ourselves at the moment. So upskilling and reskilling can look like, technically training ourselves to new things. And reinvestment can look like, as we mentioned earlier, maybe identifying a new direction or a new pathway, or putting ourselves in a new environment to create opportunities for ourselves, either in the short term or in the long term. And then finally, you might have seen this on job postings, but a lot of employers explicitly look for curiosity, going so far as to include it in their job search or their job description. You might see it as, a required qualification is motivation to learn and curiosity, or something along those lines, that an employer is really going to value, not just because of the previous bullet point, where of course it speaks to our ability to upskill, reskill, or weather a changing job market, but also because it can often really bode well for how we engage with different collaborators and partners within our workplace. Being curious about what another department at your place of employment does can really help in building relationships with that department. Being really curious about what your peers at Art Center or fellow alum are doing and how they're doing it and what they think about it can be really, really beneficial in developing connections, nurturing those connections, and maybe those connections, returning a favor by letting us know about a job opportunity or advocating for us for a freelance project. So let's talk about some ways that we can be curious, because I think some of us, as I mentioned earlier, maybe have allowed our curiosity muscle to weaken a tiny bit. So some ways that we can be curious generally: change up your routine. A really great way to kind of jumpstart our ability to process new information and utilize that information is to do something different. So maybe that looks like taking a walk to a place that you've never been before and seeing a new part of your neighborhood. Maybe that looks like going to a different coffee shop or ordering a different type of coffee just to see what it's like. Maybe it looks like doing your nighttime workout first thing in the morning and seeing how it changes your day. And if you change up your routine and you realize maybe it doesn't work for you, that's okay too. But that change up can really, really impact how we are receptive to new things and exploring those things. We can also identify our intrinsic motivations. So, what is it that we like about learning something new? What is it that we like about practicing our art and design? What is the actual location of that intrinsic motivation? Maybe it's that we really like connecting with other people, or we really like telling a story, or we really like helping other people. When we identify that intrinsic motivation, we can figure out how to pull on that intrinsic motivation to broaden our curiosity muscle, engage in maybe learning something new or exploring something new. And our intrinsic motivation and how it relates to our curiosity might be different for everybody. So it's something that you might want to talk to people about and explore and say, why do you like to do that? I like to do it because of this reason, or I feel really fulfilled and satisfied when this is happening. What we can also do, and some of us may already have experience with this, is ask for feedback from our friends and our family. Specifically as it relates to our job search, sometimes our community and the people in our lives are able to identify strengths and skills and unique abilities that we have that we aren't always able to identify in ourselves because they're looking at it from an outside perspective. And they're saying, I love the way that you relate to other people. I love how easy it is for you to communicate with new people for the first time. And you might have never thought of yourself as somebody who's a really great communicator, but now you're learning this is a skill that I have. This is a strength that I have. And maybe how can I use that both in my job search, but also in a job to feel really rewarded and fulfilled. And then finally, I really recommend being intentional about your curiosity development and setting aside 20 minutes a day to develop that curiosity intentionally. So this could be through changing up your routine. It could be through asking for feedback from friends or family. But it could also be 20 minutes a day where you Google something that you have always wanted to learn and you read a Wikipedia page about it for 20 minutes, right? It could be exploring a new direction that you could potentially take your career. It could be taking a look at a new artist and that you maybe haven't been familiar with before and the type of work that they're producing and what they're doing and where they're doing it. But specifically setting aside time to be intentionally curious can be a really, really helpful way for it to eventually become an inherent part of us and our daily lives. And the more that we're intentional about it, the more that we no longer have to be intentional because we're starting to do it automatically. So we've discussed curiosity. We've talked about kind of how it helps us with our job search, how it helps us to engage more intentionally in general. But I want to talk about some roadblocks that can come up even when we're being intentionally curious, but also in ways that curiosity can maybe help us to explore or remove. And primarily, we're going to focus on concepts called gravity problems and anchor problems. So a gravity problem is a problem that's created completely by circumstances out of your control. It's something that exists whether you are having that problem or not, much like gravity. So I'd like us to get introduced right now to kind of two different personas or two different folks that we're going to be bringing back into conversation today. The first is hypothetically a character designer, somebody who maybe studied illustration or entertainment arts at Art Center. And our character designer might face a gravity problem that looks like the animation industry has experienced a lot of layoffs in the last few years, and the future of the industry is really uncertain, right? That's something that we hear a lot of you share in meetings with our team, in emails that you send us, is this fear or this sense of uncertainty about the state of the industry and what's happening in the industry. And really, the state of the industry is a gravity problem. And what that means is that we can't change the state of the industry. So focusing on that state of the industry, focusing on what is or isn't available that is completely out of our control, can actually be a less productive way of conducting our job search. And it could be really beneficial to identify, this is something that's completely out of my control, so I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to, as we'll talk about shortly, figure out how to reframe this to make it something that I can control and that I can make steps towards. Our other user, if maybe you're not a character designer or working in the illustration space, is an industrial designer. And maybe our industrial designer's gravity problem is, I want to work at GM, but every job opening that I've seen at GM states that they won't consider candidates who require sponsorship. And now I'm worried that I'm never going to get a H-1B visa, right? The hiring practices of a company like GM, and if they have it written into their policies that they won't consider sponsorship, that's also a gravity problem. We unfortunately can't control whether they are or are not open to sponsoring a candidate. So what we can do, again, is reframe, which we're going to be talking about in a minute, how we can create a situation that we can actually create a solution for. Our next set of problems are anchor problems. And these are actually kind of the complete opposite of a gravity problem. An anchor problem is one that we have kind of created specifically by assuming that there is only one answer or one choice that we can make to solve the problem that we've had. So we've created kind of a box that we're putting ourselves in, and the anchor problem is a result potentially of that box or of that solution that we've identified that is tying us to one specific place and maybe not allowing us to move or explore in the way that we want to. So we'll go back to our users. For an industrial designer, our anchor problem might be, I need to get a H-1B sponsorship in my first position out of school. I'm exclusively looking for positions that offer H-1B sponsorship, and I'm having a really hard time finding a job. And I need that to be my first position outside of school. But that's not necessarily true. We don't necessarily need to get that sponsorship immediately after graduation or in our first position. There are lots of other ways that we can explore eventually getting sponsorship that don't require us to only apply to positions that are guaranteed sponsorship opportunities. That may actually be really effective and really fruitful if we decide to explore them. For a character designer, an anchor problem might look like, I haven't seen a full-time character designer job opening in a year. I'm never going to get a job in my industry. I feel so frustrated and stuck, right? But much like with our industrial designer, we don't need to only look at full-time positions, and we don't need to only look at character designer positions. We might consider positions in background design, or in props, or in production, or in other potential ways that we can use our character design skills that are still going to be really, really beneficial, are going to be a great way for us to use our creative muscles and what we've learned at Art Center. We could consider freelance roles. We could consider part-time roles and supplementing that with another part-time job in the design or outside of the design industry. We don't have to only look at one very specific set of opportunities or expectations and then tie ourselves to those permanently, especially if they are not supporting us or leading to the results that we're looking for. So a really, really important part of this process is, as mentioned, accepting and reframing, right? For gravity problems especially, we want to accept the facts as they are, and we want to reframe how we're approaching them. So for a gravity problem, we accept that the state of the animation industry is in a bit of flux at the moment and that there have been a lot of layoffs. If we are looking for sponsorship, we accept that GM specifically doesn't offer sponsorship to any of their job applicants. And we say, okay, knowing that, what does my next step look like instead? So an example here might look like, again, I haven't seen a full-time character design job opening in a year. I'm never going to get a job in my industry. And we can turn that into, I don't always have to focus only on full-time roles. I don't have to specifically focus only in character design. I can focus on what opportunities are available and remind myself that my job now, whatever I'm doing now, doesn't have to be my job in 5 years. And accepting and reframing doesn't mean that we're agreeing that that problem is acceptable or affirming that nothing should change. Acceptance is short term, and it's also not affirming that that thing is okay. It's just accepting the reality of the situation that we're in and then finding a way to define the problem in a way that we can actually solve, which is how all of us design, right? We identify the problem that we can actually solve, and then we solve for that problem. We don't try to solve for a problem that's unsolvable because that just makes us frustrated. It makes us feel like we're not moving anywhere. And we can change our whole mindset on that by this reframing process. So with all of these things, developing our curiosity muscle, understanding some of the roadblocks that we're experiencing and perhaps why we're experiencing them, we want to talk about now how we can take both of those things and use it to develop plans. So it's really important to have multiple plans developed, right? Identifying and planning for your dream role is amazing. It's really, really important to have kind of dreams and aspirations and to work towards those. And having an alternative plan doesn't mean that you're giving up on those dreams. It means that you're giving yourself the stability and perhaps the opportunity to keep working towards those dreams in the long run. So what can it look like to have a few different sample plans? Again, we're going to go back to our user personas, our character designer. Our plan A, right, which is our dream plan, might be, I'm going to work as a character designer. Our plan B might be, I'm going to explore design roles that are outside of character design, that are going to give me really great experience and learning opportunities. And maybe I'll make some connections in the character design space or in that department, and I'll talk about what it looks like to transfer or apply for jobs there. Our plan C might look like, I'm going to explore production roles that are in the animation industry. So I'm not going to be directly designing, but I'm still going to be working in the industry, making some of those connections, doing work that I still really enjoy based on some of that intrinsic motivation that we identified earlier, and developing and strengthening our curiosity muscle by learning some new skills. And our plan D might look like, I'm going to find a job that pays my bills, whatever that job is. It might be in design, it might not be in design. And then I'm going to join a drawing circle with other folks in the animation industry. There are many of those in Los Angeles County that you can take part in. And I'm going to use that opportunity to network and practice my skills and get feedback from folks that are actively working in that industry. And then when an opportunity pops up in the future, I can tap into that community that I've developed, tap into my drawing circle for feedback and suggestions, and maybe even a little bit of advocacy that I'm a really great fit for that role. Our other sample plan for our other user, for our industrial designer, our plan A might look like, I am going to work as a footwear designer at Nike HQ, and they're going to sponsor my H-1B visa. This is the dream and the ideal. Our plan B might look like, I'm going to take a design job at Nike, and I'm going to work during my OPT, even if there isn't a possibility that I'm going to get sponsorship from the company, because it's going to be a really beneficial experience. I'm going to make a lot of really great contacts, and I'm going to have this really great opportunity on my resume. Our plan C might look like, I'm going to take a position at an international footwear brand that has offices in the US. Maybe the office that I take a position at is in the country that I'm originally from, or in another country completely. But I know that they have offices in the US, and I'm going to work towards getting offered a role with sponsorship in the future by, again, making connections, utilizing my community, and letting folks know I'm interested eventually in sponsorship. What do pathways to that look like in this company? And then finally, I'm going to apply to jobs that fulfill my OPT requirements at companies that are more likely to consider sponsorship for employees. So this might look like not having our dream footwear job, but still fulfilling those OPT requirements for the type of company we work for. And really, really utilizing the resources of companies that are interested in or able to sponsor employees and going in that direction very specifically. And something that you'll notice about both our character designer plans and our industrial designer plans is that plans A through C all kind of filter towards a pretty direct route to our dream job or our dream role, plan A, right? And plan D is really designed to kind of keep us where we need to be and give us the stability to eventually get to plan A. So please consider your plans don't all have to be a specific direction or a specific route to your dream role. Some of your plans can just be, I'd like to keep myself stable for a little while, and I'm going to get back to working on plan A in the future. So how can we prototype some of these new plans, right? Because prototyping is part of our design process. It can also be part of our job search. First and foremost, scheduling informational interviews. So informational interviews are these really great conversations that you get to have with employers or professionals in your field that aren't you interviewing for a job or asking about a job. They're opportunities for you to connect and chat through what it looks like to work in that industry, any advice or suggestions that they might have, feedback on your portfolio, recommendations for next steps that you can take. And scheduling informational interviews with Art Center alum who are working at companies you're interested in or in roles that you're interested in can be a really wonderful way to learn more about the paths that you can take to get to those places. You might also, especially if you're in kind of that entertainment illustration space, create a storyboard of your potential plan to see it all laid out and then identify any potential concerns that you have. Once we see it all laid out and what it can look like, we can figure out, do I have any concerns about this plan? Are there any things that I need to consider or add into the plan in order to feel a little bit more comfortable executing this plan? Maybe what other resources or tools can I bring in, like my tools at Art Center, my community, to make this plan really effective? And finally, we can try to simulate our plan through shadowing opportunities, volunteer work, maybe even a temporary position to get a sense of whether or not we like that experience, we like the opportunity or the industry, and really give us some of that information that we need to determine if we want to go all the way in. And what's most important in developing these plans, executing these plans, is to always make sure that we're assessing our priorities. So make sure each plan you develop is a reflection of your priority. If your priority is to be doing design work that you love, and that's your highest priority, make sure each of your plans are a reflection of that. If your highest priority is immediate financial stability and you're a little more flexible about the design work that you do, make sure that your plans reflect that too. And then make sure that you're reassessing your plans as much as you can. Have your priorities changed? Are they the same, but maybe you've looked at your plans in a new way and realized that they're not the best reflection of your priorities that they can be? Always making sure that we reassess and that we're aware of and being the most applicable to our own needs is a really, really important part of this process and in being kind of kind to ourselves as we go through it. So this brings us to where we would like to take a brief little respite or break. So I'm going to start this timer for 1 minute, and I would really love to encourage everybody, since we have a nice long workshop today, to maybe get up, stretch, grab some water, whatever you need to do to kind of absorb the information that we just shared. We're going to be back in 1 minute after I start the timer, and then we're going to start a whole new body of information. You're welcome to turn off your camera or pop back in, whatever you would like, but we'll meet back here in about 1 minute after our break and resume. Thanks.
And we're back. All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit less about what to do to make the job search work, or how to activate curiosity, but we're going to talk about how to manage the maybe the difficult environment that you're finding yourself in. So we want to focus on building resilience. And what is resilience? It is our individual ability to adapt to difficult or challenging life experiences. Resilience is a psychological concept. Down at the bottom, you see I have mental, emotional, and behavioral coping strategies. That's another way to think about it. But what's really great about resilience is it's something we can learn and practice. So we all have our own kind of built-in level of resilience, but wherever we're at with that, whatever resources and skills we've developed in our life, we can practice building that like a muscle, just like curiosity. So let's talk about some resilience activities. And we're going to start with doing something that makes you feel accomplished. So if you are in the middle of a difficult job search, you may not feel accomplished very often. So look to other areas of your life where you can find that feeling of accomplishment, whether that's a hobby that you have, a new skill that you undertake to learn, whatever that is something that you can feel, accomplished. Maybe it's building something, maybe it's completing a puzzle. Maybe it's reading a book series or training for a race. All of these things are things that can give you that feeling of accomplishment in one area of your life that you might not be getting immediately in another area of your life. You can consider volunteering. Volunteering is great because it can go on your resume in place of a job gap. It gets you out usually with other people. Volunteering is often communal, and it can help combat feelings of isolation. And people who volunteer report positive feelings from helping and giving back to others. So again, volunteering is a way to sort of shore up your ability to cope with difficult feelings in another area. Another thing to do for resilience is to celebrate small wins. This is the exercise that we started our workshop with because we wanted to kind of build the feeling you get when you celebrate a small win. And this can really help build your confidence and develop your sense of certainty in yourself. And then the last one that I'm going to give you is express gratitude. Again, when psychologists study people who are happy or who are content or who consider themselves to be thriving, these are often people who have a gratitude practice. That is either in a journal or in some other format. They are regularly taking note of things that they are grateful for. So again, this is a little bit like celebrating small wins because you're often looking for the very small things that you can be grateful for, but it can include big things as well. The main thing is that it's a mindset that the practice helps you develop, and that helps you be prepared for those difficult times and those difficult situations. So another key aspect of resilience is taking care of yourself. And I put real self-care at the top of this slide because sometimes we think we get talked into thinking that self-care is a glass of wine and Netflix after a long day. But real self-care are those things that actually physically help us feel better. So that includes things like making sure we're getting enough sleep, and doing everything we can to benefit our sleep. even though I know sometimes when we're worried, sleep suffers. But putting a little extra effort into winding down at the end of the day, not maybe scrolling, doom scrolling on our phones right before bed, things that help us sleep well. Another thing is looking after what we're eating. You know, are we nourishing our bodies well, or have we fallen into that convenience trap of anything that we can quickly eat? So looking after your body with sleep and with good food. And then my third image here, and I'm going to go into this in a little more depth in a minute, is being in community with people, not letting ourselves get totally isolated, getting out and being around others, leaning on the people in our lives that we know for support. So that's what I have to say about self-care. And now we want to try Slido again. So we'll see if it works better this time. What is something outside of your art and design practice that makes you feel accomplished? This goes to that first resilience practice that will let us see, oh, this is working. Oh, great. Something that makes you feel good. 2 for exercise. That's awesome. Anybody else got something? Ooh, more exercise. I am not logged into Slido and it's a little complicated with my setup, but I'm just going to throw out there that I'm a video game player, and oh, look at all of that. So making progress in a video game can make me feel accomplished. Raising a cool and confident kid, that's awesome. Relationships with friends, baking. And then the lovely thing about baking is you get to eat what you bake. Cooking, feeling loved, sharing a meal, having a good meal. These are all really great ideas for things that make you feel accomplished. So keep these options in mind when you are facing a difficult situation. Looks like we've got more people typing, so I'll just keep waiting. We'll see what else shows up. Petting a dog. Awesome.
Petting a dog also makes me feel accomplished. I second that one.
Yeah. Going through a box of clutter. Oh, the feeling when you get to the bottom of the box and you can shake out the dust that's collected in it. It's a great feeling. Clearing a storage unit. Crochet. Yeah, making things that are not your direct focus of your job search can be really satisfying. Going for a bike ride. These are all wonderful. Donating stuff I don't use. Fantastic. Thank you all so much for sharing. So this hopefully gives you some ideas about how you can do these resilience practices. This is kind of a celebration of small wins. These are small wins in other areas of your life, and ideas of things to do to help you feel accomplished. So something else that's going to help us feel accomplished is how we deal with failure. And I want to focus on redefining failure in a couple of ways. So first up, one key part of redefining failure in a useful way is to separate our outcomes from who we are. And this is not a simple thing to do. This can be a lifelong practice, but it's a good thing to start thinking about. And that is when something doesn't go well, when you don't hear back from your job applications, that is not necessarily about you. There are often many factors that go into something not going well. And even if it's something you directly did, that's not who you are. So that's the first redefinition that we want to work towards, is separating what happens from who we are. this involves recognizing that we can do well or do our best and still not succeed. And I think in something as complex as a job search that has as many factors involved, this is a really important thing to keep in mind. This is another way of saying the top point, which is your success or your failure at getting a job is not who you are. You can do your best, you can do everything right, and maybe there were 400 candidates for the job, and you just didn't get your application. They just literally couldn't look at all of them. So that's another point to kind of separate ourselves. And then remember those gravity problems. Remember that sometimes we are up against things we cannot change and that we have to work around. So another aspect of redefining failure is changing our mindset about failure. And psychologist Carol Dweck did the research on this, and she wrote a book. I think it might even be called The Growth Mindset. But I want to give credit where credit is due. This has been a widely adopted idea. And that is that we see ourselves as someone and something that is possible to change so that we can learn and grow from our experiences and change based on those experiences. And that's opposed to a fixed mindset, which sees us as a static kind of person, and who we are is who we are. So developing a growth mindset ties nicely into an idea from Designing Your Life, which is understand different kinds of failures. One is a screw up. This is a one-off. It happens weirdly. You're driving on the route that you drive every single day, and for some reason you take a turn that you don't normally take. And you're like, why did that happen? That's a screw up. It's not something you need to worry about. It's not something that's likely to happen again. It's just a one-off. So those are screw ups. The next thing are things that come from our weaknesses. And these are the things that are always going to be a challenge to us because they're just, maybe we don't have a good memory for people's birthdays. And we forget an important birthday, a birthday of someone important in our life. This is the kind of thing where we develop systems to help us work around those weaknesses, but it's also just recognizing that maybe we are not the person to put in charge of the birthday party planning. And then the last kind of failure, which is most failures, is growth opportunities. This is back to developing a growth mindset where we assess what happened. We look to see why it happened, what the involved factors were, and then we look to see how we can change it again, change so that it doesn't happen again. So this may be that we applied really late to a job that already had a lot of applicants. And so maybe we want to assess in the future whether that's worth our time or energy so that we don't feel like that's a failure if we don't hear back. Okay. We talked a little bit about community earlier. We want to be able to lean on our community. And I want to, again, from Designing Your Life, think about different types of people who are in our community. So first of all, we have our supporters. This is why I picked the cheerleader image here, because these are really the people who are always cheering us on, who are telling us that we are valuable as we are. These are the people who are really helping us to keep our spirits up. Supporters may not do much else. Your supporter could be your grandmother who just thinks the world of you and just always helps you see the best in yourself. Then we have participants, and these are the people who are actively doing things for us. So maybe this is a friend who makes an introduction on your behalf. Maybe this is your career advisor who you've come to see to get help with planning, making your plans and prototyping your plans. So there are participants who are more active in doing things to help you. And you want to, it's really important to let those people know what you're looking for so that they can be on the lookout for ways to help you. And then the last group I want to talk about are our intimates. This is usually our family and our closest friends, romantic partners. These are the people who have the biggest stake in what's going on in our life, but who may not always share our priorities, right? Maybe mom is really worried about your ability to get a job, but she has a different way of looking at it than you do. So we want to keep our intimates updated about what's going on in our lives. And we want to know when our intimates are our supporters or our participants. But we also want to recognize that there may be people who are very close to us who are not aligned fully with our initiatives and our priorities. So you want to activate and make use of all of these aspects of people in your life. And it is never too early or too late to build community. How do we build community? We can do it in a lot of different ways. We can pursue hobbies. And especially if they're not solitary hobbies, but even if they are, the online world is a great way to get to know people. You can get to know people in your classes, here at Art Center. Just walk up to somebody and say, hey, you seem really cool. Let's chat. Professional organizations can be a great way to get to know people in your industry. They often have events and ways to get to know people that way. And then you can do some online outreach. Those professional organizations, the online outreach, we typically call networking. But really, it's all about building a community of people who are related to you in various different ways. So remember, when you're in a difficult job search, reach out to your community, find your supporters, find your participants, so that you're not doing this alone. And to help you with community, we have 2 workshops next week. I'm going to be doing one on Tuesday at 12 that talks about community in your career, talks about the importance of building community. We'll talk about some simple ways to do that, and then how to activate that community in a network. And then on Thursday, October 10th, Amy Gonzalez, one of our career advisors, is working with LinkedIn as a super tool. And a lot of what she's going to cover is going to be how to get involved with other people and how to learn about people using LinkedIn. So that will address kind of some of that online networking. All right, as we come to the end of the formal part of our presentation, I wanted to address the situation that international students are in specifically, because after graduation, you have that time, that clock of how much optional practical training, OPT, you have available to you and how long you can stay in the country with or without a job. So given that, it is even more important that international students have multiple plans for what you want to do as you pursue your job search. And that's why one of the user personas that Eilish used as we talked about planning was an international student. Again, I want to emphasize the possibility of looking at multinational businesses. If you really want to work in the US, the door that opens that may actually be working in another country first and then being transferred within a company to an office in the US. So that's another area to research. Again, it's maybe not your A plan, but it might be a plan that gets you to your plan A with some time. If all else fails and you can't find an OPT sponsoring, OPT eligible job, it is possible to volunteer in your field. You have to be doing the work that you trained for, but you can take a short volunteering stint with your OPT and have that work towards your visa. This can be tricky because I don't want to ever encourage someone to work for free. But I just do want to throw that out there as an option. And then lastly, make use of the annual, the government publishes a list of the OPT, of the H-1B sponsoring companies. And this can really give you an idea of who is open to sponsorship. And so that's one aspect of the link I just dropped in the chat is one way to access that list and to research those companies. If H-1B sponsorship is what you're looking for, that can be a way to find who might be likely to do it.
All right. We are now, as Roxanne mentioned, kind of nearing the tail end of our formal presentation today. So really just wanted to kind of recap some of the primary topics here before we have one last activity and open up the floor to any questions. So first and foremost, we really want to encourage everybody to be curious, maintain that intentional curiosity. If you are able to continue to be curious, that looks like having maybe more than plans A through D. It might look like having 6 plans or 8 plans or a variety of plans that you did not even know about before that can, as mentioned, really help you provide that stability that can eventually lead us to plan A. Which of course brings us to making sure we develop multiple plans to give ourselves some options. Of course, we want to make sure that we're leaning on our community. Our community might even help us understand plans that we did not know may have existed before, as we learn what folks from our programs or who have our skills and interests have done before us. Next, we want to make sure that we're reframing our failures and problems into opportunities that we can actually solve. So not gravity problems, but problems that we can actually provide actionable steps towards. We want to make sure that we're practicing some of those resilience building activities like expressing gratitude and celebrating small wins and practicing strong self-care. And then finally, I really want to encourage everybody to give themselves some grace. It can be really, really frustrating to feel like you're in a position with your job search that you're not happy with, that you're not satisfied with, or that is not what your plan was, right? And so I want us to give ourselves some grace to feel that frustration, to let that frustration out, but also to remind ourselves, as mentioned, that failures that we experience, perhaps not getting the job that we wanted, or not having as many opportunities in our field as we would like, are not a reflection of ourselves. And while we can do all of these different things to make our job search perhaps more effective or more intuitive to what we really want, we also need to give ourselves grace at the end of every day and know that we're doing our best. Which brings us to our last activity for the day. I would love for everybody to share one new thing that you're going to do after this workshop to support your job search. And that can be a tangible, actionable job search related thing, like setting up an informational interview or sending in an application or outreach message. But it could also be a self-care item. It could be making sure that we take a nice walk later and get to bed on time. It could be making sure that we have a dinner that's really nourishing if we can. Or it could be something completely different. But for everybody, again, our last share out today, What is one new thing that you're going to do after this workshop to support your job search?
It's working, yay. Organizing my notes. All right.
Being kind to myself and having a positive outlook is an amazing one. Reaching out to friends and colleagues for feedback is also an amazing one. Homework. I love that too. Homework is also very helpful. Sign up to learn more things to get my brain going. Absolutely. Sometimes it's really helpful to just decide to learn one new thing. It doesn't even have to be something related to our design practice. That can just get our brains firing in new ways. I recently started trying to learn the process of making sourdough bread. And wow, there's a lot more information there than I expected. And it's been really great for my brain. I'm doing math that I haven't done in a long time. Reaching out to companies, informational interviews. Awesome. These are all fantastic. I see one more person typing, so we'll give it another second for anybody who wants to share. Pursue more into freelance art. This is awesome. I think exploring the freelance world can be a really amazing way to cover a lot of the different things that we've talked about. It's community building, it's having additional plans, it's exploring curiosity and a new thing that maybe you hadn't considered before. That's fantastic. Awesome. Well, thank you everybody so much for sharing all 3 times. Thank you so much for listening to us today. That concludes our formal presentation, but we'd love to open up the floor to some questions. So I am going to stop our recording for the moment.